So welcome to our second event, actually, of the series State of FemTech Plus. Today we're going to talk about SexTech. Is it actually entertainment or health or both? Yeah.
I can take over. So I'm Sarah, and this is Claudia. We work for Untitled Kingdom. I'm just going to make a very short intro before we introduce our guests today. So we work with Untitled Kingdom, that is a software development company. We focus on health tech and femtech. And last year we were writing the ebook about State of FemTech. And we decided to host those events on a couple of subjects from the ebook to dive a bit deeper and to discuss with experts the subject that we find either most interesting or still a taboo, and we want to break this taboo. So yeah, that's the main reason we're here today. We want to discuss whether it's a health issue or strictly an entertainment.
Yeah, and today we have a great pleasure to introduce our guests with great experience in helping women and actually couples in sexual health and wellness. And we have today with us Lyndsey Harper, an OBGYN and a medical doctor, a founder and CEO of Rosy. Here is Emma LaRocque, a co-founder and CEO of Intimate Wellness Institute, and Patricia Cervantes, a co-founder and CEO of Vibio. If any of participants has a question, just write it down in the Q&A section, and let's start.
Yeah, we're going to try to read the questions during the discussion, so we're not going to wait till the end to read those questions. So feel free to refer to the subject of discussion. Hopefully we'll all engage in talking. So again, hey everyone. We wanted to start with actually the subject that we have for today's event. So, but more from the health perspective. So is sexual pleasure a matter of health? And what does sexual health affect? We're still not really openly speaking about it, how sexual health, especially in case of women, is affecting their general health. So maybe let's start with Lyndsey. How would you refer to that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, sexual health and our general health are completely entwined, right? So our sexual pleasure, sexual experience affects our health, and vice versa. Our health also affects our sexual pleasure and sexual experiences. And, you know, I think as a physician, when we ignore anyone's sexual health, whether, you know, men or women or whomever, that it's actually ignoring a huge chunk of their entire wellness and health picture. And we really owe it to our patients and to, you know, everyone, everywhere, to really incorporate that into our medical training, into the conversations we have with our patients in the exam rooms, or these days over our telehealth visits, and really understand that if we're ignoring that, then we're completely doing our patients a disservice, because we do know that sexual health is completely intertwined with levels of depression, levels of anxiety. Those are the most comorbid conditions that are seen with sexual dysfunction. So you can't ignore sexual health, especially in that context. And then we also know that, you know, sexual pleasure, orgasm, connectedness with your partner has many positive benefits on our health, right? So we know that it releases those feel-good neurotransmitters in our brain, that it improves overall sense of well-being, and also that it, you know, lowers blood pressure and has actually really positive effects on our cardiovascular health. So that data is most robust for men, not a shocker. We do have a few small studies that suggest that the same ring true for women. I think that it's definitely an opportunity for further research, and that's, you know, really what we need to be pushing towards, so that we can say, you know, with confidence and with data backing us up, that this is something that needs to be addressed on a really regular basis.
Emma, do you want to refer?
Yeah, so my background, I have about 10 plus years experience launching new disruptive technologies within women's health, whether it's been slings for female incontinence to apps, to now there's so many amazing therapies for, I hate the word vaginal rejuvenation, we've all heard it, but radio frequency, laser, CO2, all these technologies. And what I found was that physicians really had a difficult time asking the conversation and starting the conversation with their patients. And it really starts with educating the physicians. So part of what IWI provides is a service to physicians that gives them a multifactorial approach to sexual health, because we're not just solving for the symptoms in sexual health for women, we're solving also the emotional side. So giving them a means or a way of connecting with a behavioral therapist, we have an app called IWI Med, and they're able to connect their patients with a behavioral therapist who's licensed in speaking to women about their issues. And we've seen, unfortunately, due to COVID, we've seen that women are suffering from domestic abuse, domestic violence. And it's truly unfortunate. So having that accessibility and approaching this not just for functional reasons, but for behavioral reasons is really important. And I know, according to a recent study, that 60% of women aren't satisfied with their sex life. So there's a huge opportunity here, not just in technologies, but also in services. And with Rosy and what you're doing for women by educating women that really just don't have any idea, and they're relying on Dr. Google, and I'm still trying to figure out who Dr. Google is because I don't know. But these women are searching for these procedures on Google, so it's important that we give physicians evidence-based, safe, effective treatments, especially giving them a treatment algorithm where they can safely and effectively incorporate these devices, incorporate a treatment algorithm that's really going to address these issues.
Yeah, I think we've all heard stories or even have our own experiences where talking to a physician about no satisfaction, no pleasure in sex, or even pain in sex is just like, yeah, it happens, whatever, and nobody really goes deeper into that. And so I guess this education of physicians would be a great start to actually give women the opportunity to talk to someone about it and to find what's the reason for it exactly.
But do we have any data or research about disproportion between men and women in terms of pleasure?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want to answer this, Lyndsey, but I would say that, you know, 60% of women aren't satisfied with their sex life. And it's not surprising given that in another recent study, 52,000 Americans in male-female encounters, 75% of men orgasm every time, while only 33% of women do. So it's unfortunate.
That's what I was going to refer to, is that concept of the orgasm gap, which is what Emma was talking about, which is that, you know, male partners report orgasming much more frequently in their last sexual encounter than their women partners do. And another interesting part of that is that the male partners have an overestimation of how often their female partners orgasmed in their last sexual encounter. So, but yeah, you know, I also wanted to address the physician education question. When we think about men's sexual health, you know, everybody knows where to go if you're having erectile dysfunction or any, you know, if you need a penile implant, we go to a urologist, right? The challenge is that the female analog does not exist. I think that we as women think that it is our OBGYN, but I can tell y'all that the training is just non-existent in medical school, and in residency particularly is where it's most pertinent for this topic. And it's not that physicians don't want to do these things. We desperately want to be able to help our patients. We hear about these concerns literally all the time. It's just that we're not armed with a really fact-based and easy to sort of digest algorithm or plan of care for these problems. The messaging for in resident education is it's Pandora's box, you're not a therapist, like all this kind of stuff. And that's just doing a huge disservice. So a large part of, I know what we're all passionate about is changing that narrative, changing that culture in medicine, because we're just completely ignoring the concerns that so many of our patients have. So that's a huge part of our business. And we have, like 2,800 physicians in our network who utilize Rosy as a resource for their patients. And that to me says they are really interested in having this stuff for their patients. They just don't have the time or the training. So I'm really hoping, together as a field, we can get that changed for the residents that are coming through now.
Yeah, and if the doctor isn't thoroughly trained, even having the resources and the materials, if the physician isn't thoroughly trained on the proper algorithm on how to speak to that patient, especially for female sexual dysfunction, whether you're dealing with low libido or pain with sex, they're not going to yield life-changing results that they could be giving that woman. So take, for instance, a breast cancer survivor who really has no other option. She's limited in the fact that she can't have hormone. She's distressed. She's not having intimacy with her partner. And I see that over and over again. And so when we first started the monthly master courses with IWI, we had maybe about 30 or 40 doctors attending. Now we've trained over 1,000 physicians to really understand. They buy these technologies, they sit there, but they really don't know how to utilize them effectively, and also utilize combination treatment for these women that maybe, can't take hormones, or maybe they're not a laser candidate, or maybe they don't want a needle, right, for anorgasmia, which is PRP. So it's really important that they have that intake form when they're asking the questions, and they can walk them down that path, whether it be before childbirth, or after menopause.
Yeah, there's definitely a big misconception around female pleasure, not only in the medical industry, but in society at large. As you mentioned, there's this idea that the female orgasm is elusive and mysterious and somehow hard to achieve. But in reality, the orgasm gap only exists amongst heterosexual couples. Lesbian couples don't have this issue. So right. In the end, it's a matter of education and realizing that women's body behave differently than men's body. We need to do a lot more research about this, but it also takes practice and a willingness to hear different stories right. that sometimes men are not as willing to learn about. So yeah, it's a whole societal change that needs to come from this in order to things right. to improve.
I think that, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that I think that lack of education, or maybe some misconception here, is also that if you can't orgasm, you're probably one of those women who can't, so just pretend. And instead of trying, instead of learning how to do it, or trying to find a reason why we can't, we're just starting to pretend, and we become very unsatisfied. And as you said earlier, it has huge impact on our general health and on the way we feel. But there is this misconception that some women just don't orgasm and we don't look for the reason for it. There's also this concept from pornography that orgasm looks a lot different than what it actually looks like for women. So I guess the education here and access to knowledge that is real and not based on imagination would also make a huge change in this field for women.
Yeah, it seems like education is actually a huge part of a technology company.
Yeah, women's conditions often focus, I think, more on pain and fear associated with vaginal intercourse. And I do think that sex tech needs to address these issues on the fear, which is the emotional aspect, and on the pain. I mean, those are the two primary points. And I think for women's devices, we know they work a lot better than men's devices, right? There's a lot more solutions for that. So I think really having the general knowledge and the education around, you know, why am I feeling this way? Just asking the question, it does lead to empowering women to research and utilize Rosy's tools. I think they're fantastic. And also educating the physician too on these, I mean, just on orgasms, right? Because again, to your point, women stop having orgasms, their libido, it affects their libido, and then they just are broken. And they're like, well, I'm older, I don't need to have sex anymore. And they give up just because they're not educating themselves. So.
Yeah, I think the common thread here is really about everything we're talking about, right? About this orgasm gap, about the lack of physician training, really goes back to just women's sexuality, in my opinion, being a function of childbirth and available for men's pleasure, right? So that we don't take any ownership in what is going on with the process. Our pleasure doesn't matter in the historical version of women's sexuality. I think that now we have an opportunity to say, well, that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like that's just completely invalid. And along with that recognition comes all of these other obligations, right? We have to be able to talk about women's pleasure without shame. And that is the common thread of all of these problems, that we as women, if we are having a sexual problem, think that maybe it's just us because we've never heard anyone else talk about it. As physicians, if you ask a woman about her sexuality, you're kind of overstepping, or how is the patient going to receive that? But the same is not true for men, right? So I think that it's this realization, sort of as individuals and as a larger society, that women can own their own sexuality. It's not just available for these other, you know, things that used to be considered primary. And then because of that, we have to erase the shame and isolation in all circles that come with that. It's a huge task, right? But it's conversations like this and people like everyone here and everyone who's watching that can continue to push that ball forward. And the faster, the better, because that's how we make real change.
So Patricia?
Yeah, I was going to say that over the last few years, we've seen a bit of a conversation form around sexual rights and about pleasure in the way that I personally hadn't seen before. And it feels a little bit like about 10 years ago when we started hearing about mental health. And now mental health is something that we can speak about more openly than we did 10 years ago. I think the same is going to happen with sexual health. It's definitely the case for women's pleasure, but I think there's also taboos and stigmas around male pleasure that are going to resurface in the next few years. A little bit regarding breaking gender stereotypes and gender rules, because so far the conception of sex that we grow with, it's very gender stereotypical, so very focused on penetration, on the man being in control and kind of dominating the situation, while women take more of a passive role, and sexuality is something that happens to them instead of something that they can create and they can explore and they can take charge of. So I think that dichotomy is something that's going to change in the future, breaking stereotypes for women and also for men.
Yeah, to add to that quickly, I think when we focus on women's sex tech, we really should be focusing, in order to break that taboo, the common conditions that women face, right? Which is pain, fear, function, dryness, and low libido. And I think when we overcome those educational barriers, the availability, the access to this information, the personal stigmas, the cultural stigmas, the investment limitations that we see with VCs, women's sex tech is a massive industry. And the more we start focusing on the common conditions, I think we'll start to break through a lot of those barriers.
So how huge is the market actually of sex tech?
So I know the sexual health market has grown 10% over the last 3 years. The value of the market is actually expected to increase to 2.26 billion by 2023. So the opportunity right there, I mean, is huge. And now we have these great platforms like Rosy, Genève on that menopause talk that you did last week, which was excellent. And really start educating the physicians, starting to educate women to make them more empowered to research these conditions more effectively. So, I mean, the opportunity is definitely there, so.
But is SexTech a solution for teenagers also, or on the contrary, for middle-aged people like in their 50s, 60s, and 70s?
Absolutely. I think it ranges from all ages. And it depends again on those cultural stigmas, but you know, if you just look at 1 out of 3 women being sexually abused, there is definitely physical issues resulting with that. And it's so sad and unfortunate, but that's also another question physicians don't ask. And it can have, I mean, the emotional effects, the physical effects of it is detrimental. And I think the more we get open and the more we start to break through that barrier, I think sex tech, just for that reason, whether what age you are, I mean, you can have issues, whether it be STDs to chronic UTIs, et cetera. And Lyndsey, I'm sure you can answer to that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the awesome things about sexuality is you never figure it all the way out. And just maybe when you think you do, like something else happens. And so it's a real opportunity for true lifelong learning and exploration. And I don't think that that ever ends because, you know, first we are sort of learning all about maybe like as toddlers, right? What are the correct anatomical names for our bodies? Why does my mom have a tampon? You know, like little intro, right, to reproduction and sex. And then of course we go through puberty and have our own personal experiences. Open and honest conversations during those times are so important and formative to the future sort of adults' ability to have, you know, these shame-free conversations with their partners. And then, you know, on to sexual debut, childbearing, throughout the lifespan, right? It never ends, hopefully. And, you know, when you're in your 80s and 90s, there's other things to talk about, right? There's AIDS, there's medications, there's treatments, there's conversational tools. So I think the earlier we can sort of inject this idea of curiosity, lifelong learning, and most importantly, communication in our life cycle, the better we will be through each of these, you know, new experiences that we encounter and our ability to negotiate that with our future partners.
Yeah, it's really a shame that we're still considered to be adult industry when we're sexually active in one way or another, be it masturbation or just, you know, general gender identity, even that could be part of sexual wellness, way before we're adults. And most of the sexual dysfunctions or sexual problems or anxieties around sex that we experience as adults come from attitudes and stigmas and things that we bring from our childhood. So it's really important to, when a child, for example, is maybe touching their genitals or masturbating, to properly explain without shame what's happening, and that's a natural thing. And when they see nude bodies, that's a natural thing, and sort of remove the sex aspect to it, because in the end, it's a natural function of the body, as I'm sure you know. So this is something that we as adults as well need to start learning how to communicate with younger people, with kids even. And obviously it's not something that we're used to. I don't think any of us have had the proper sex education that we should have for years, but we need to take that step so the next generation is better prepared to, you know, learn about their sexuality and their gender identity and their sexual orientation and their bodies.
Yeah, we also have to remember that kids are curious and they will find it one way or another. But unfortunately, with this stigma, they're not going to find the right content. They're not going to find anything about health. They're just going to find stuff that may not be very healthy for them. But yeah, they are going to look for it on their own anyway. So we can as well just give them good guidance in this subject. Okay.
So Actually, I'm curious also about the research on female organs and male organs. Is there any disproportion in that case?
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, like, yes.
I'm referring to, for example, a first sketch on the female clitoris that was published in 1998, as far as I remember, when male organs were studied 20 or 30 years earlier.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think we're still, like, as OBGYNs, still trying to disseminate and understand the complete clitoral anatomy. I think that, you know, it just kind of goes along with our previous conversation. Obviously, you know, men's penises are external. They're pretty obvious and visible. They change when you're looking at them. But, you know, the female clitoris and only exists for pleasure, and it's sort of a little less obvious and just has been in the medical literature completely ignored until very recently, due to some really important, you know, people and work that has been done to illuminate that a little bit more for all of us, not only as physicians who are operating right in this area, but also as women who want to more fully understand our individual pleasure. So I think that that's been super you know, informative, but also just another one of those checks on the box of like, what the heck, you know what I mean? Like, why are we so far behind? But it's not surprising anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, even the just a quick note, even the vocabulary that we normally use to describe our genitals is completely wrong. Just referring as everything as the vagina is so recurrent. You can see it everywhere. And you know, just being able to name each part correctly is a big step in recognizing what each part does. The fact that penetration isn't the same hole that we use to pee, for example, is something that some people don't even know, which is Anatomy 101. So those sort of misconceptions, in the end, what they do is hinder any sort of progress in sexual health, in terms of fertility, in terms of menstrual health, but also in terms of pleasure, if we bring it to the sexual arena, of course.
Absolutely. And Patricia, same thing that you were echoing earlier about talking to our children, like that's the same. You know, like my son calls a vulva, and my in-laws are like, what the heck?
Yes.
You know, and it's like, but that's the thing, like us as grown women have to be teaching everybody, like, well, this is your clitoris and these are your labia and this is called a vulva, not a vagina. And if anyone else says that, you correct them, you know, like it's our duty. And so, yeah, I think that, and like you said, then they'll be able to better communicate with their doctors. They'll be able to better communicate with their partners. They won't be like talking about like down there, like it's a scary, you know, place to never go. And it's just all of that just sort of shrouded in shame.
Below the belt, I hear that a lot. Like,
yeah,
come
it's,
on,
it's totally, yes, it's totally, really, the example is set when we don't even use the correct anatomical words. I mean,
and the fact that we have 8,000 nerve endings compared to, I mean, that's 8 times the amount of nerve endings compared to men. So we are meant to have pleasure and we are meant to orgasm. And the more in touch, the more confident I think women get with their bodies, especially at a young age, you know, they're more open, they'll be.
We have a question, so I will just ask a question from the audience. So the games industry is rife with lack of diversity and extremely poor representation of women and sex in games. What examples of good representation of sex and sexuality in games have you encountered? Interesting approach. I don't really know much about games, so I wouldn't be able to answer this question. I think generally the idea is that still games are created more for men than for women. So definitely I wouldn't look, at least now, and as I said, I might be an ignorant here. I wouldn't look there for right examples, I think. I don't know if others have any other experiences with this.
Unfortunately, I do not know.
Okay, so we're very sorry that we weren't able to answer the question correctly. Okay, sorry, it's complicated to deal with this.
Yeah, so we can jump on actually on the advertising, which is a huge subject, because sexuality of women is often used to advertise products for men, actually. But is there any disproportion in advertising products, sexual products for men and women?
Maybe Patricia would answer that because of the product she's working on.
The perception that I have from the male sex toy industry, which is something that I've researched quite a lot, is that there may be a bit of a step behind in terms of innovation when it comes to products. So products for women, they give you new sensations. You can find all sorts of vibrators and sex toys that adapt to your anatomy, while male sex toys tend to be very similar, and they try to replicate the act of sex and penetration for the most part, not all of them. So I think the way they sell them is a bit more, I don't want to say shady, but a little bit shady. So it isn't, so I think with women, there's a bigger trend now of associating masturbation with being empowered and being desirable, which is great. But I think there exists still this stereotype of a guy that masturbates a lot and it's a loner, and somehow there's something inadequate about them. So in that sense, I wish that in terms of sex toys, we saw more innovative sex toys coming for men that tackled also some of the concerns that women have. So yeah, that's something that I think it's changing, but it's a slow change.
Yeah, but have you had troubles with advertising your products or services on social platforms, on the internet, anywhere? And if yes, just Emma is.
Yeah, I would say even my business name was a flag, unfortunately, until I kind of worked my way around that. So purchasing Facebook ads, especially, a lot of it, whether it's dealing with vaginal dryness, anorgasmia. So a lot of the content that we advertise and that we advertise for our members. So the physicians that are associated with IWI, even getting a press release out there to blast to local news stations, specifically talking about sexual health, the term sexual always is flagged. So when you tie, if you tie sexual to health, it's still flagged as a taboo. So unfortunately, you do have to get creative. I am hoping that in the future, I know that there's groups lobbying about this, especially the more we come out with some great therapies and great devices. I know a company that uses fruit, for example, to show the vulva and to show the vagina. But it's unfortunate because erectile dysfunction, even penile implant, I mean, you can say penis in Vogue, you can't say vagina. So we definitely have a lot of barriers to overcome with that. But I think as these taboos, you know, break, as women become more empowered, as more technology start to come out, I think it will be in our favor here very soon. So.
Yeah, we've had the same experience particularly with Facebook. I think that it seems like there's some progress being made.
Yeah.
It's sort of a mix. I would say most of our ads get approved. Our most recent one actually didn't. And we're running like a class in Rosy in the app right now called Back to Sex School. It's just like intro to all these things that we're talking about, female pleasure and communication and all this stuff. And it got rejected. And we went back and had to change the caption because it talks specifically about clitoral anatomy. It talked just really specific. So it seems like they're gaining some tolerance for the more general, but not for the very specific. And the feedback is, you know, we don't promote things that promote female sexual enhancement. And it's like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, these are educational issues. These are healthcare issues. I've gotten on the phone with people before, like, I'm a doctor, like, let me run my ad, you know, but it doesn't work all the time. And the same thing with press releases. It's the same like tagline, like, we don't promote female sexual enhancement. It's like, well, that's not even what we're doing. We're trying to get a baseline level of knowledge out in the world, you know, and much less enhancement, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just trying to do the groundwork. So yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult. It's probably more difficult than some other, obviously, businesses and some other, and maybe the male counterparts, although I'm unaware of a male counterpart of what we do. So, you know, I think that it's challenging. I do hope that there's positive trends in the right direction, but even some companies who you think, well, they're going to be so progressive, they'll, you know, like, who are representing sort of, you know, the future, they're still not there yet. So it's pretty frustrating.
Not at all. There's definitely a double standard. Not when it comes to sex toys. Sex toys are completely forbidden to advertise in Facebook.
Right.
Even if you advertise something unrelated to sex or sex toys, but you have a website. So in our case, the website that links to, you know, our sex toy in the bio of the account, you're completely forbidden to advertise anything, not even an event about, I don't know, body painting.
And what I found, if you're focusing on the condition, it tends to, it will get approved. So if you say female sexual dysfunction, FSD, and you label it the condition, and I think that's the issue, is that we are not talking about this being a medical condition, female sexual dysfunction. So saying erectile dysfunction or with penis, it's completely fine. But when you start talking about it in a medical sense, unfortunately clitoris is not, but when you start talking about the overall condition, our ads get approved.
Yeah, we're just actually yesterday having this conversation regarding the event today, that there is a bit more space for discussion about sex, about women's sexual health, but usually in relation to health. So of course we're aware that sexual health is a part of general health, but then again, we have to prove that we're talking about health to be able to speak about it out of the taboo subject. So the pleasure as itself, the entertainment of sex is still a huge taboo when it comes to women, of course, and to women's sex. So if you want to advertise something regarding dysfunction or some condition, that might be okay. If you're trying to treat the condition, even if it's with sex, then they may agree, but if it's just for pleasure, just for fun, it's still considered so horrible that it's not out in public at all. And that would be okay if men's sexual pleasure was not in public, but it is everywhere in car advertisement or sports advertisements, just
on the
everywhere.
streets.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that the key there is that men's sexual pleasure, like a man's orgasm, is considered part of the health, right? Like that,
Yeah.
like what if 40% of men were walking around and couldn't have an orgasm? Like health alert, you know? But if for women, the pleasure is considered like the cherry on top, right? Like, ding, you're welcome. And it's like, wait, for some reason, those are, you know, exclusive of one another. But in reality, they really should all be the same. You know, pleasure is part of health as well.
So just since we are here to talk more about sex tech and technology, what in your opinion can technology actually do more? Like right now, sex tech is still considered probably some kind of tool for masturbation. And as you said before, masturbation is still not seen as something very positive. Even though we start to see it as empowerment, it's still not entirely positive. But we do tend to think about masturbation when we think about sex tech. We think about sex shops and the toys we can buy there. But what technology can actually do more except education that we also just covered?
Yeah, so for our platform, I truly believe that if the doctor is thoroughly trained and has an understanding of all of these technologies that are out there, and that they're really changing the quality of life for women by, you know, giving them a toy that's part of their treatment algorithm, whether it be for laxity, anorgasmia, even dryness. So the more we educate our physicians, so for now, we've educated over 1,000 physicians on really how to incorporate an intimate wellness treatment algorithm, because if your doctor prescribes it, that's okay. But if you were to just buy it on Amazon and then your husband sees it, it's kind of like, why did you get, you know, and it kind of opens up a weird conversation. But if your physician goes, you know, this is actually going to benefit you for all of these functional reasons, and we start getting our physicians to talk about sex more, it will slowly break that taboo. And I think women now are becoming more empowered. I think it's increasing 10% every year. And so we're really going to see, if we give them that, their patients are going to come back and say, you've changed my life. You know, I didn't get a divorce with my husband. You know, just the stories that I've heard is just overwhelming.
We have pretty interesting input, so I would like to read it. It's from chat, from Sarah. Recently, Raspberry Dream Labs were forced to cancel their event, Let's Talk About Polyamory. They were removed by their hosting platform, removed from the public access, and denied advertising rights. It's deeply disappointing that we still live in a sex-negative and sexophobic society. How do you recommend we start conversation with the gatekeeping platforms about changing their policies? And just to clarify, I don't work for them, was said to be cancelled.
Yeah, this is a huge problem. I know Angelina from Raspberry Dream Labs. I didn't know that this happened, but you know, I think this is something that's going to keep happening, and one person, one company can't really do anything about it. Even the major sex toy companies are forbidden to advertise in main social. So this is an industry-wide effort. I think all of us in some moment need to join forces and really start making noise about this issue. It's not even platforms, social media. We're talking about financial services. It was a nightmare for us to open a business bank account in the UK. We managed to do it, but we got rejected even by new banks, by Revolut, by Monzo, which are supposed to be disruptive and, you know, accepting. So there's a huge stigma. Even PayPal could ban us from using their platform just because we're adult industry. So, you know, it's a problem that we can't fix on our own. It's changing. Dame Products and Unbound Babes, these are sex toy companies in the US, launched a campaign, I think it was earlier this year, or maybe last year, about approved and not approved, where they compared ads by sexual dysfunction, like erectile dysfunction companies like HIMS, that were allowed to advertise even in the New York subway, while sex toy companies that had a very clean message, really clean aesthetic, nothing explicit, weren't allowed. So this is this is an issue with the sex tech industry, but more specifically with female pleasure, and there's no way to deny that.
I think there's a very sad example as well from the tech conference, we won't name it here, that do allow entire, section for sex-related technology, but did not allow a smart vibrator for women because it was indecent. So unfortunately, it still happens even in tech industry, even among people who actually gave the award to this project. It was selected as best project on the conference, but then it was forbidden from displaying it, which is hard to understand. But regarding problems, not just with advertisement, you said about the finance industry, I didn't really expect that, but there are also issues with VCs and subject of sex, especially sexual pleasure for women. Actually, there was a great article, I think we've read a couple of days ago in Wired, that VCs should learn to, I don't remember the title exactly, but learn the word vagina And there were some stories of entrepreneurs who were discussing their projects with investors. In some cases, those were a bit funny stories, in some cases, horrible harassment stories. But what are your experience with VCs, with getting financing or input from VCs?
I'll be happy to start. So we closed our first round in February of this year, right? Right, just in time. And yeah, and so, you know, my experience with VCs was actually honestly really positive, I have to say. I think there were a few interesting things that happened. In my experience, you know, people don't have the opportunity or the sort of safe place to talk about sexual concerns or problems. And so really in my personal life and fundraising and public speaking, my experience is that whenever we start the conversation, the receiving party is like, there's like a surprise look, like, did she just say all those words? And then there's like a waterfall of information, right? And it may not be personal, but sometimes it is. And it's just about providing an opportunity for people to have these conversations. And so for me, when I was raising, you know, some interesting things that happened is if there was a female on the investment side, of course, she was the one who I was interacting with, which is great and which is fine. But I also do think that, you know, the men should take the sort of initiative to be involved in these conversations as well, for nothing more than just educating about, you know, what's going on. I do appreciate, you know, more female VCs being in the decision-making seats, although it's still obviously very underrepresented. But generally it was not a terrible experience. I did not have anyone sort of be rude or openly sexist or chauvinistic or misogynistic or anything that I considered to be negative. You know, of course, there were lots of no's, and that's just part of fundraising. But I do think it was a better experience than others have had. And it may be because of our sort of health position in the market, you know, more so than the entertainment position that, you know, other people might have.
I had the opportunity last year of attending I don't know if you've heard of it, the Women's Health Innovation Summit. And it was a great event. And a lot of I would say, VCs that are raising capital for these companies are mostly, you know, around pregnancy and menopause, not so much sexual health. But I think when you approach it in a very black and white manner and you're speaking to a VC, when you're in front, we tend as women to go down that emotional road with the opportunity, especially around sexual health, and to really, if there's anyone on the call today that is looking to break into this space, I just highly advise that you just stick with the statistics and how it's growing, and the fact that it's growing 10%, I mean, year over year, and it's grown by 2 billion over the last year. I mean, that opportunity speaks volumes. So approaching that with VCs is key. So I suggest that. Just focus on the market. Women are worth investing in, right?
Definitely, it is 50% of.
For sure.
Sorry.
Whenever we've had conversations with VCs, that has become really obvious that they're looking for factual information, and it's hard just because there's so little research, especially at a worldwide level, to justify things that seemed common sense. Just like, for example, millennials are more open to experimenting in bed, or they're more accepting of new sexual experiences, and they have more modern attitudes, things like that. You always have to be really factual about. It seems that when you talk about erectile dysfunction, especially if you go to a VC, it's very male dominated. They all understand the pains of the problem. They understand the size of the market. However, when we talk about sexual pleasure, especially for women, it seems like they can't really imagine the size of the market unless you give really, really strong statistics that for sure exist. But just the fact that we need to focus a lot on that and kind of back everything we say with statistics goes to show that we also have to do some education when we go into a conversation like that. And there's for sure VCs and investors that are progressive. And you know, things are changing. There's more female investors, and pleasure, especially sex tech as a whole, is getting more traction, and investors are seeing that. We still find some people, not necessarily investors, but people from the business community, that question why sex tech and especially sex toys are occupying tech spaces or medical spaces. We were in a health conference in London last year, Giant Health, and we had a stand where we showed our vibrator, and we got a few people that were just going around asking, why are you here? Why is a sex toy here? So there's still education needed in terms of, you know, what's important, how sexuality affects all of us, and that it's a real problem. There's a real market for it. It's huge. I think any other industry with the same growth would be super hot. Yeah. I think sex tech is not as hot just because of the stigma that we see, but hopefully those things are changing.
Yeah, on the positive note, it is changing, and I think we can all observe that in the last couple of years there has been more discussion and there has been more information. So yeah, definitely there is a change, and I'm sure that tech products are also participating hugely in this change and creating new environment, new way of talking about it with more respect, with more education behind it. There's one question from Tracy. Where can I find those statistics for financial purposes? It refers to the statistics about the growth of the sex tech industry.
I'm sending some links.
Oh, yeah, I see the link now.
I had my market research document open, so I'm just adding some links in case people are interested.
Thank you so much. So after the event, we will actually prepare a summary, and we will send all the information as well. So everyone will get the links. Hopefully we're going to be able to save it all.
Yeah, do we have something in our Q&A section interesting?
Yeah, we have, and actually one of the question refers to the questions that to the question that I would like to close our event with. Unfortunately, we're almost up to an hour already, but just a little disclaimer before I ask the question. The Q&A section is for questions, as the name states, questions and answers, and not for orders. So I would just kindly remind to the men who are joining us to ask questions and not order us what to speak about. So thank you. And the question is, what do you think is the future in next 2 or 5 years of the sex tech?
So like I had mentioned before, with the statistics of it growing 10% every year, I think the future is incredibly bright for sex tech. Just with the amount of technologies out there, and going to these summits and seeing the innovation, just maybe for pelvic floor therapy, whether it's for sexual therapy, whether it's for anorgasmia. And I think the more we train the physicians, I know I keep going back to that, but the more we incorporate these sort of technologies within healthcare practices, it's going to enable the conversation, it's going to open up the door, and women are becoming more empowered, like I had mentioned earlier. So the growth within itself, just in the vaginal rejuvenation market, which I hate that word, but unfortunately Google loves it. And so seeing the trend in just these conditions, vaginal pain, vaginal dryness, and looking at the Google trends even internationally to just the US, I mean, it's increasing year over year. And with technologies and with platforms like Meet Rosy and these great devices for women, the more we can lobby, you know, and really fight, unfortunately, the hurdles of social media, the more technologies that come out. I like competition because I think we need it, right? We need more companies, especially around female sexual health. So for the next 2 to 5 years, I think it's just going to keep increasing. I don't think we're going to go backwards. No.
Is pandemic influencing actually your companies?
Yes. Yes. So we spent a year to 2 years getting all the regulations done for our IWI Med platform, telehealth platform for licensed behavioral health therapists. And the gray area with telemedicine before COVID, I mean, it was, some states are very lenient, some states are very strict. And now it's because of because of COVID, I had all of our IWI members using it just to see patients, which was incredible, not just for behavioral therapy. And I think that because of it, the access to get that specific care, especially around sexual health, where women feel so vulnerable and it's hard to talk about these issues in person, and having that accessibility, I've seen a huge increase in our business. So unfortunately, it's unprecedented times, but yeah, telemedicine especially.
Yeah, from our side, we're building an app-controlled vibrator, which works remotely, no matter where they are in the world, the partners. So obviously COVID has been great for market validation. Before COVID, everybody asked, but what's the market size of people who are long distance or, you know, that would be interested in using this product? Those questions have stopped. Also, the market of sex toys has been growing quite fast during COVID. Sadly, we were on pre-sale, so we didn't have an Ella, our product, to ship. But yeah, the industry is growing, and COVID is probably here to stay, at least for a few years until we find a vaccine. So yeah, this is probably a trend that's gonna keep growing.
We've experienced a lot of the same, growth. Our user conversion, the app is completely free to download, and then there's a paid version, and that conversion from free to paid has doubled during COVID. And then also, like, where people are spending their time in the app, we have all evidence-based interventions for sexual dysfunction, and one of those is erotica, which people seem to be really exploring and enjoying, which I love. And then also, it's really supported the telehealth side, which we just launched as well, with providers feeling more comfortable providing telehealth services and patients now accepting that as a part of routine life. So I think that it's a huge opportunity probably for all of our businesses as we spend more time with ourselves and with our partners, and hopefully, taking some time to explore positive changes and progression in our sexuality.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the discussion. Thank you, our guests, Patricia Cervantes, Lyndsey Harper, and Emma LaRocque. Thank you. Thanks for all of the participants here. And we're just inviting you, actually, to upcoming event in the next week.
Thursday.
Yeah, next Thursday we'll be talking about another subject. Is it profitable to invest in women's health? I think pretty much we have the answer. But we'll be speaking with Rachel Brown, Cheryl Chang, and Dr. Brittany Barreto. I think it will be also awesome as today's discussion.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for this opportunity. Really appreciate it. What a great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was really
so
great.
much for having us. It's been great.
Thank you for participation and openness, and for what you do on a daily basis, because that's really great. There are people around the world who are taking care of it, who are talking about it. This is what is changing the current situation. So thank you for that and for joining us today.
Yeah, and let's speak more about vulvas and clitorises.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.